issue of voting justice. We cannot have confidence in the integrity of the electoral process. And as Ronald Reagan famously said, trust but verify. We do not have verified voting in this country. The Green Party has long demanded it. And in 2004, the recounts in Ohio led to those reforms. The abolition of black box voting in Maryland, in California, in New Mexico, demands for robust audits and state-funded recounts. Make no mistake about it. The Stein recount effort is about ensuring the confidence and the integrity of the election system as a first step towards genuine voting justice in this country. There is a growing movement for real democracy. The Green Party is proud to be in a leading role of that movement. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jonathan Abity. He is the lead counsel for the Jill Stein recount efforts and founding partner of Emery, Selly, Brinkerhoff, and Abity. He has a diverse trial and litigation practice with extensive experience in both federal and state courts. Jonathan?
Good morning. We are here.
Nice and loud. Nice and loud.
We are here to address a subject that should not be controversial. It should not be the subject of debate or of argument, because no matter what your political persuasion is, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, an independent, or a member of the Green Party, if you are a citizen of this country, you should be interested in a verification of the vote. We are here to verify the accuracy of the vote. We are here to ensure that the election for the highest office in this country was an accurate vote. The idea that we cannot confirm the results of a presidential election is frightening. The idea that we do not have working systems to ensure the accuracy of the vote is frightening. The idea that people are opposing the effort to verify the vote is frightening and disturbing. The idea that people who are supporting that effort are being criticized, in our view, is deeply misguided and backward. When we believe that the democracy is not functioning properly, when the votes are not being tabulated accurately, we do not put our heads in the sand. We do not hide. Jill Stein is not hiding. Confronted with razor-thin voting margins in key states, confronted with the undeniable utilization of archaic, unreliable, antiquated voting machinery, and confronted with the evidence, the overwhelming, indisputed, unprecedented evidence that there have been cyber attacks, that there have been breaches of security, Jill Stein is joining and now leading a campaign to ensure that the vote is being accurately tabulated. As part of that effort, we are in 3 key states: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. In Michigan, last night, we received a major victory in federal court in Detroit. Several weeks ago, we launched an effort to exercise our right to assess the accuracy of the election. We paid our fee. We marshaled our resources. We began to work with election officials. And after we did that, the forces of opposition and resistance marshaled against us. Donald Trump was a chief proponent of that effort. His representatives and his surrogates have attempted, or were attempting, to shut down the process in Michigan. And so this weekend, we went into federal court. And yesterday, on Sunday, a federal district court held a hearing and listened to all the evidence of what we were attempting to do in exercising our democratic rights. And he heard all of the arguments from the Trump campaign about why that should be obstructed. And after midnight, last night he issued an order requiring that the vote proceed in Michigan. That is a victory for voter verification. It is a victory for democracy. And importantly, it echoes what is happening in Wisconsin, where a recount of 72 districts is underway. And guess what? In Wisconsin, the Trump campaign through a PAC went into federal court and attempted to stop that effort. And the federal court in Wisconsin dismissed that petition and that attempt at obstructionism very, very quickly. And so now this morning in Pennsylvania, at this very moment, we are filing an action in federal court in Pennsylvania to seek a statewide recount in Pennsylvania. And we are taking that action in Pennsylvania because it has become clear to us over the past several days that the level of obstruction, the barriers to this effort are so extreme and so radical, and that the state system is so ill-equipped to deal with that we have no choice but to seek federal intervention there, just as we have done in Michigan, just as we are doing in Wisconsin. The sad reality is that the voting system in Pennsylvania is a disgrace and a disaster. And it's a disgrace and a disaster because Pennsylvania is using antiquated and unreliable voting machinery. It is a disaster and a disgrace because there is no paper trail for many of the machines that are used in Pennsylvania. It is a disaster and a disgrace because in Pennsylvania, the courts impose exorbitant punitive fines which make it economically impossible to engage in the recount process that should be available to all democratic citizens under law. It is a disgrace because there are procedural barriers that make it virtually impossible to engage in the recount process. And so we are filing today in federal court in Pennsylvania a petition to have federal court intervention. We believe that the infirmities and the irregularities in Pennsylvania rise to constitutional violations under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, under the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause, and under the First Amendment under the right to vote jurisprudence. And so we will be seeking in Pennsylvania, as we have done in Michigan and Wisconsin, very simple but necessary and important relief. A tabulation and a counting of the paper ballot and a forensic examination of the machinery so that we can assure that our democracy is functioning.
What are the irregularities in Pennsylvania?
Let me just say that what is clear is that in all of these jurisdictions, we are encountering, in the face of a constitutional exercise of our rights, resistance and obstructionism. Donald Trump has attempted to influence, obstruct, and stop this democratic process. We're here because the owner of that building is attempting to stop this process, and it's undemocratic. And it's undemocratic because in a democracy, every vote counts. Votes matter. And because votes matter and because votes count, we will avail ourselves of every available opportunity under the law to see that that effort is vindicated. And as David Cobb said, the important thing to recognize is that this is an effort made out of love for our democracy. Because we believe in democracy, we believe in trusting our democracy. And as David Cobb said, as one Republican president said, you trust, but you verify. Thank you.
Of any of the irregularities?
Jonathan Abity, Emery Shelley Brinkerhoff and Abity, counsel to Jill Stein and the Jill Stein campaign. Thank you.
FYI, there will be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A period after all of the speakers. So if you have questions for Mr. Abedy, you will be able to ask them at the end of the speaker list, okay? Our next speaker is Mark Crispin Miller. He is a professor of media, culture, and communication at New York University and the author of Fooled Again, The Real Case for Electoral Reform. He has been an election integrity activist since 2000. Mark? Professor Miller?
Yeah, I'm trying. If I can get over there.
Come on.
Thanks. All right. I want to give Donald Trump some credit, actually. Before the election, he pointed out that the election could be rigged, and he said that if the election was rigged, he would not necessarily accept the result. I said at the time, and I still believe, that he was absolutely right, that our elections can be rigged, and I also believe that any candidate that has grounds to contest the outcome of an election should contest that outcome. I think that's a reasonable position. Now, as things turned out, it didn't go quite the way he expected. It didn't go quite the way anybody expected. It turns out that he won, Hillary lost, or so it seems. So after that astonishing victory, as the New York Times called it, election integrity activists looked into that big surprise and did find considerable evidence that that outcome may have been the result of rampant vote suppression and election fraud. There were stark discrepancies between the exit poll results and the official numbers, and 5 states beyond the margin of error, and all of those discrepancies benefited Donald Trump. All over the world, that kind of thing is instantly recognized as a red flag justifying further investigation. There is nothing un-American about that. There is nothing anti-democratic about that. On the contrary, there were also 75,000 undervotes, that is, ballots filled out completely except for the presidential vote, mostly in Democratic precincts in and near Detroit, another red flag. The team in Wisconsin has found that the voting seals, the protective security seals on a number of voting machines, have been broken. This is evidence of fraud. On top of that, now, we have Donald Trump and his team fighting tooth and nail to shut down the recounts. Frankly, I don't understand that. It seems to me that if he won fair and square, he would crave an opportunity to prove that he won fair and square. So I think he should let the recounts proceed. Let me also say to people who think that Jill Stein's effort to get these recounts going in these 3 states is a covert effort to install Hillary Clinton. I want to note, first of all, Democrats never contest election outcomes, even when they were obviously robbed. Al Gore didn't do it. John Kerry didn't do it. Russ Feingold hasn't done it in Wisconsin, and happened to him twice. Democrats always bend over for it. That is wrong. They should have done what Donald Trump threatened to do in the event that he lost, okay? Well, there's also the fact, just to be clear about this being about voting rights, this not being about any party or about any candidate, that Rocky De La Fuente, another presidential candidate, has filed for a recount in Nevada, which Hillary won narrowly. And he's done this for the sake of our election system, to make sure that our votes are all fairly counted, okay? There's also the fact that Hillary Clinton got her party's nomination as a result of rampant vote suppression and election fraud. And the evidence for this is all laid out in an authoritative report called Democracy Lost from Election Justice USA. I strongly recommend it to everybody. This has been a year of the most disastrous election practice in our history. We have a faith-based voting system. We have a voting system. We have a vote. Okay. We have a voting system. We have a voting system that requires real radical reform. Both parties have been guilty either of corrupting the system or of sitting back and let the system be corrupted. There is a bipartisan stranglehold on our voting system. This has to stop. We need hand-counted paper ballots. Paper ballots counted in the open. We need to get rid of private companies participating in the election process. All American citizens should be automatically registered on their 18th birthday, and Election Day should be a national holiday. This is something that we can do. It's something that we must do, even if our seeming president-elect doesn't like it, however much the media speaks untruths about it, and even if both parties don't like it.
Great job! Great job!
Sorry. Our next speaker is Tara Siwak. She is a student at New York University, double majoring in media, culture, communication, and broadcast journalism. Tara?
Hi. I was right here. I was right here on November 9th with thousands of others who shared my utter disbelief and terror at the thought that Donald Trump as president. It reminded me of when I was in London late last June, just after the Brexit vote, which had a very similar effect. But different too, because the UK has a voting system so much more secure than ours. It reminded me of when I was in London late last June, just after the Brexit vote, which had a very similar effect, but different because the UK has a much more secure voting system than we do. They can say that whether they like it or not, more of them voted to leave the European Union than voted to stay. We can't be so sure about Trump's victory. We talk about it in many of my classes at NYU, and in one class of 15 students, there were 3 who couldn't vote. All were from Florida, which Trump won by 112,000 votes. One never got her absentee ballot because she had to, quote, verify her signature even though she had registered with her signature 2 months prior. And the other 2 had received their absentee ballots on the morning of November 9th, and it was simply too late. Those 3 were typical of countless students disenfranchised by Florida Governor Rick Scott. And let's look at Wisconsin, where Trump won by just over 22,000 votes, and where Governor Scott Walker has found many ways to block the votes of the state's several 100,000 college students, 200,000 at public universities alone. Walker has forced college students living in the state to reestablish their residency on June 5th, when most of them are home for summer or reestablishing like a new apartment or whatnot. Walker has also cut back early voting hours, signed one of the strictest voter ID laws in the nation, and done whatever else he can to stop these votes. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of hearing people say our voting system is so corrupt that there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. I'm sick and tired of feeling like my generation's needs and wants are not being heard. So much of what we've accomplished in this country at one time or another seemed impossible. So we need those recounts in Wisconsin and elsewhere, including Florida, where voters filed for a recount 3 days ago. And beyond the recounts, like Mark Miller said, we need paper ballots, hand-counted in the open. We need automatic voting registration for every citizen when they turn 18. And Election Day should be a national holiday so that every worker has a chance to vote. This task is not impossible. We are not helpless. There are things we can do, but we need to do them together, and we need to do them now. Thank you.
Repeat your name, ma'am. Please interact.
Yeah, Tara Siwak.
Our next speaker is Susan Finn. She is a Pennsylvania voter, a 43-year-old mother of 3 who is a registered independent and was among those in the state who submitted a recount petition as required by law. Ms. Finn.
I'm here today as a concerned registered independent voter and a mother. I petitioned for a recount in my state of Pennsylvania after my messy experience voting in this election. That experience left me without confidence that my vote was counted. After Donald Trump's lawyers argued in court at a hearing, which I was given no notice, to block our recount effort, a judge ruled it could not move forward. I'm also here today to ask Mr. Trump, if you are as patriotic as you say you are, then why are you trying to strip a fellow Americans of our constitutional right to a fair, transparent, and secure election. Like so many other Americans, I don't know whether my vote was counted. I cast my ballot on a touchscreen DRE machine that gave no confirmation of the result, after poll workers had to handwrite my name into the rolls. They did that because my official change to my married name was somehow not registered in the voter roll book, even though I had received my new voter registration card 2 weeks prior. I followed all the rules, but I still left my polling place with much uncertainty about whether my vote would be counted and whether other citizens would have the same unsettling experience. How is this possible in America in 2016? This is unacceptable. This is not about the outcome of the election. It is about the constitutional right every American has to have their voice heard at the ballot box. It concerns me that Mr. Trump and his allies are trying to deny fellow citizens this right, no matter who they cast their ballot for. And it also concerns me that our system is a mess, especially in Pennsylvania. It makes it hard for people to cast their vote, but not only to cast their vote, but to validate the process and to verify that your vote was counted. We need and deserve a system where every American can trust the outcome. I will keep fighting until I know that every fellow citizen's vote, including mine, has been counted. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Zerlina Smith. Zerlina Smith is an Illinois state coordinator for the Green Party. She's worked on city, state, and county legislative policy campaigns to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and additional issues including reparations, prison reform, police brutality, and equal funding for all schools across the county. Zerlina.
Good morning. I'm Zerlina Smith, Z-E-R-L-I-N-A. I am an Illinois registered voter. I'm here today because my black grandparents fought for our rights to vote. As a black woman, why is Trump, who claimed that this election was rigged from the beginning, holding back? When you think of people of color, just don't think of blacks or Hispanics. Think of Asian Americans, think of Haitian Americans, think of everyone who has some color to their skin. We want to know, with the rhetoric that he spoke about when he won, why is it now a problem for this recount to be just? In a democratic state, which I live in, we know that our machines were outdated. In black communities, we had 2-hour waits to vote. In white communities, there was still a 20-minute wait with outdated voting machines. What do we say about the democracy in America, the civil rights that people have fought for to give people of color equal rights? We stand here in front of Trump Tower asking Trump to hold up to what he said to get people to stay home and not come out to vote. So he is now our newly elected president to stand behind the people as he served this term for 4 years to gain some type of trust and accountability for not being the clown that he was on his election campaign. And as a black mother and a registered voter in the state of Illinois, I will go across the country to make sure that every vote counts regardless of the color of the person's skin. And Trump needs to stop withholding the people's voices and let our voices be heard. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the Reverend Elston K. McCowan. He is currently serving his second term as the St. Louis Green Party Central Committee Chair. He is also the co-chair of the Gateway Green Alliance, which is the city's local green chapter. Most recently, Reverend McCowan led the state of Missouri as the ballot access team leader to gain ballot access for the Jill Stein for President campaign. He also serves as the senior pastor of Star Grace MBC, which is located in an impoverished neighborhood in St. Louis. Reverend McCown.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. That's Reverend Elston McCowan, E-L-S-T-O-N, last name McCowan. First of all, I want to, M-C-C-O-W-A-N. First of all, I want to thank the Stein Baraka campaign for standing up for our rights, for speaking truth to power, to defending those who are less fortunate than others, and giving a voice to those who have been disenfranchised. Want to just echo what Zanino talked about, is that for so many decades, African Americans and others in the civil rights movement have fought so hard to ensure that all Americans' votes count. I don't believe that the majority of Americans believe that votes shouldn't be counted. I believe everybody believes that everybody's vote should be counted. And that's what Jill Stein is standing up for right now. Now, as you heard, I am a reverend, and so I just can't help but reflect back on the idea that this is like David and Goliath. This is the most unlikely person to come and defend us and defend our rights, but she is standing up for our rights. She's brave, she's courageous, and I'm going to stand with her, and I'm going to stand with her campaign to ensure that all votes are counted. I know that you've heard over this press conference how many votes in Michigan weren't counted, didn't matter. And every vote should matter. And I just want to emphasize that over and over again, that every vote really should matter. You can't have 75,000 votes that people have cast their votes, but all of a sudden in an area where it's the president, they didn't vote for the president. That just doesn't add up, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. My grandparents once said that just doesn't make any walking around sense to me. And so I'm proud of Jill Stein. I'm proud of the campaign. I'm glad to have worked on her campaign. I'm glad to serve with her, and I'm glad that we're moving forward. I just want to ask that we just stop the bickering. I don't understand, why would anybody want somebody else's vote not to count? What's wrong with America when people are howling, shouting, don't count the votes? We should be shouting, count the votes. We should be shouting, count the votes. And you should be shouting, count the votes. We want those votes counted. Every vote should count. All Americans' votes do count. All of us participate in this democracy. And if it's a true democracy, Trump would be standing right next to Jill Stein right now saying, count those votes. Because when he was running for president, he said that he wanted those votes counted. He wanted to make sure that folks didn't go around voting 2 times and all this kind of stuff. And so the question is, we're in front of Trump Tower now asking, where is Trump? And Trump should do a press release, or more likely a tweet, and say, count the votes. Thank you all.
Our next speaker is James Lane. James Lane has been an activist and advocate for political transformation in our country since joining the Green Party in 2000. In 2013, he was the Green Party candidate for New York City Public Advocates, and in 2015, he ran for Congress against the district attorney that failed to indict anyone in the killing of Eric Garner. James.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I did run for public advocate in 2013, and I apologize to America, because if I did one, Donald Trump would probably be in jail right now because of all his business practices, his bullying, and his threats to sue people that disagree with his opinion. Today we are here about an issue that's not just about, who won the election. This is about voting rights. In this country, we've had civil rights leaders fight, and people of black and brown people fighting for the rights to vote. And we have seen decade after decade that right taken away, just eroding away by the minute. And that's why we're here today. We're here to call out the fact that these machines that are going around have no process in place for verifying the votes. This isn't just about a recount. This is about accurately counting, accurately verifying these votes. And, and a lot of people have touched on this before. A lot of the machines that have issues seem to, just by happenstance, appear in communities of color that are disenfranchised already. So what you're telling people right now is they have the power to change the world by voting for a particular candidate, but yet they don't have the power to challenge the results that are coming out from machines that have been proven to be flawed and have errors and there's discrepancies. So we're here today to call out the fact that this recount needs to go on. And there's no elected official or elect official that should be stopping it. That's why we're here today. For democracy needs to happen on the streets and in these recounts. And that's all I have to say.
Hey. Our penultimate speaker is Sherry Honkala. Sherry Honkala is a nationally and internationally recognized anti-poverty and human rights advocate. For the past 25 years, she has dedicated her life to creating a movement led by the poor and not their advocates. Her interests have also led her into politics. In 2011, Honkala was the Green Party candidate for Sheriff of Philadelphia, running on the promise of refusing to evict families from their homes. She is possibly best known for being the Green Party nominee for Vice President and Jill Stein's running mate in the 2012 U.S. presidential election. Sherry.
I bring you greetings from poor and homeless families from across the country. Trump has filed a lawsuit in my state of Pennsylvania to stop the recount. He's done this after he himself has talked about the corrupt political system in our country. And we sure know that if he hadn't won the vote, he would be standing here today. He is doing this after he came into my neighborhood, into Kensington, when people from the Trump campaign knew that none of the immigrants, the low-income folks, poor people of color in my community would probably not be voting for him. Soon we found in our neighborhood spray paint in various different areas, just the word Trump. Well, you know what? These were the areas where there was a history of racial conflict. If you are from Pennsylvania, you know our story. It is a long one. And it has been said that Pennsylvania is like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Alabama in between. We are tired of the politics of intimidation and fear. And I'm speaking to all of you across the country, whether you're poor, Muslim, a returning citizen, an immigrant, living in a trailer park, or you're disabled, or you can't vote because you're from D.C. or Puerto Rico. We hear your cry. We think your votes matter. We think you matter. And we are not going to back down to fear. We will not be afraid until we restore real democracy and fair elections in the United States of America. We will not allow you to take away the last thing that we have, and that's our voice. So you can bring on as many people with your billions of dollars, try to shout us down, try to use other different various forms of intimidation, but we will be strong. We will come together as a people. We will take our democracy back. Justice, voting justice now.
We are coming up on our last final speaker. I just want to remind all of you in the press that after our final speaker, we will have a brief Q&A period for the press with Jill Stein and Jonathan Abity. Our final speaker is Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party's 2012 and 2016 candidate for president. She is an organizer, physician, pioneering environmental health advocate, and a mother on fire. She has helped lead initiatives to fight environmental racism and injustice, to promote healthy communities, to strengthen local green economies, and to revitalize democracy. She has helped win victories in campaign finance reform, racially just redistricting, green jobs, the cleanup of incinerators, coal plants, and toxic threats. In 2014, she was principal organizer for the Global Climate Convergence for People, Planet, and Peace over Profit. Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you, Mel, and thanks to everyone for being here today. Thank you to all of our speakers who represent the diversity of America, the richness of America, the importance in America of elections that we can trust. We're here today to stand up for exactly that, for a vote that is accurate, secure, and fair,
what makes America great. The promise of democracy and the promise of justice for all. Today, judicial decision last night in Michigan by Judge Mark Goldsmith, who affirmed in his decision this recount advances our fundamental right to vote, election fairness and accuracy, and these things are the bedrock of our democracy. Sir, a recount in Michigan is a question of 75,000 blank votes. A large increase for all unvoted prior elections, about 70%, raising the possibility community have been disenfranchised by own these particularly in the counties destroyed. $1 million bond was going to be imposed on 100 voters who were calling for a statewide recount. Add to that, the court date was being advanced to a time at which it would be impossible to provide the evidence that would be required in that court date. So, to make a long story short, it's clear that the fix was in against a verified vote in the state of Pennsylvania. So we are now moving to federal court to ask the court to please support and stand up for our constitutional right to vote, as expressed in the decision last night by the Michigan judge. That right to vote is embodied in this recount effort to ensure that we have a fair and accurate election that we can trust. So we are here to assure Donald Trump that there is nothing to be afraid of. If you believe in democracy, if you believe in the credibility of your victory, put down your arms, end your bureaucratic obstruction, end your intimidation, and join we the people of America who are calling for a democracy that serves all of us and elections that we can trust. So with that, we look forward to continuing to work with all of you in this grassroots movement to ensure that we can trust the results of this election and to make the improvements that we need so that we don't need to jump through all kinds of bureaucratic hoops in the future. We don't need to hold bake sales on steroids to try to raise millions and millions of dollars simply to ensure that our vote is accurate, secure, and fair. This is the constitutional right of all of us that we are standing up for today. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to ask Jonathan to join me, and we will take your questions. Maybe you should. Yeah. So Jonathan, if you switch. And so Melissa, our press director, will be taking the questions. Yeah. Yes.
Donald Trump has called the recount effort as a scam to raise money. How do you react to that?
So once again, we urge Donald Trump to look at the facts, not to make up the facts. And in fact, if he takes a look at our website, you will see that every dollar raised is actually going into a segregated and dedicated recount account, so that this money cannot be spent for any purpose other than advancing the recount. At this point, it doesn't look like there is any possibility that there is going to be money left over, because the price keeps being raised on us. The price of our democracy, which is actually an outrageous concept, that we have to dig deep and come up with millions of dollars to affirm our democracy. Nonetheless, it's very clear there are not going to be dollars left over. We will be lucky if we have enough dollars, and I encourage people to go to jill2016.com/recount to ensure that we can make this very critical exercise in affirming our democracy, that we can make that happen. Thank you.
Do you feel like, Dr. Stein, do you feel like the outcome, though? Because I'm getting mixed messages.
Yes.
Some people say this is not about the outcome, this is not about Hillary Clinton. But what I just heard from you is you think the outcome will be differently in these three states.
Well, I think the outcome will be very different in the minds of Americans. The outcome will be that we have an election system that we can trust. That is our first and foremost intention here, is to verify the vote and ensure that we have a accurate, secure, and fair voting system. Whether it will change the outcome, we don't know. And I think it would be unfair to raise expectations that the outcome is going to change. That's not our intent. And when we identified Michigan as one of the important states to examine, there was no victor at the time. So I want to underscore that we were not challenging one candidate or assisting another candidate. This is about ensuring that all votes get counted and that voters can trust this system going forward. Thank you.
Ma'am, what evidence do you have of specific irregularities, and what proof do you have that those 75,000, I think that's the number you used,
yes,
are blank? What proof do you have?
So I don't know, Jonathan, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think there are a number of things that raise tremendous concern in an election.
Just answer my question, though. What proof do you have that those 75,000 ballots are blank, and what specific examples do you have of voting irregularities?
There is no way to determine. We think, compelling circumstantial evidence that machinery that is unreliable and archaic, machinery that has been outlawed in several states because of its unreliability is operative here. There is no question the federal government, through the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, has confirmed that we have had an unprecedented level of cyber attack and cyber intrusion. There have been cyber attacks on the voting systems in Arizona and Illinois. Voting files were seized. 20 other states were the victims of other attempts to intrude and hack this election. The Democratic National Headquarters was intruded. The email of John Podesta was intruded. We have assembled the world's leading experts in computer security and computer science, and they are unanimous. I'm answering your question if you'll let me finish. They have determined that it is indisputable that this machinery is vulnerable, that there is circumstantial evidence, and it is highly plausible that an intrusion has occurred, and the only way to check is to verify. And the verification process is something contemplated by our democracy. We are not engaged in a crazy, radical, undemocratic process. We are taking advantage of the mechanisms in every state that are supposed to allow us to explore when the most important election in this country could have been compromised. So anyone who's opposed to this, and the person who owns that building behind us, is involved in an anti-verification campaign, in a let's sweep it under the rug campaign, in a let's hide it. And we are not going to surrender to that, because the essence of a democracy is grounded in the vote, in the awareness that every vote counts. Votes matter. We have mechanisms to ensure it. We have checks and balances throughout this system. When people go to a tennis game, they spend $45 to make sure that when the ball is called in and it might be out, we should take a look at it to see if it's actually in or out. And guess what? Sometimes it's out.
So do you want to
and so what I think many people think, the 150,000 people have decided that it's worth $45 to make sure that our democracy is functioning. I think the democracy is probably as important as a tennis match.
So you want to recount each vote in those 3 states?
We want to recount all the paper ballots. The experts, the world-class experts that we have assembled are unanimous that the only way to verify this and make sure that our democracy is functioning and not dysfunctional is to count the ballots.
What is the Pennsylvania judge specifically asking for?
Oh, Mel, are you officiating? Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
What is the judge asking for right now in Pennsylvania?
Oh.
They are requiring a series. It's a Byzantine, labyrinthine effort. Everybody, I think, has experienced in our lifetimes that bureaucracies in governments and municipalities can make our life very difficult, if not impossible, when we're trying to do the easiest thing. The history of poll tax in this country is a history of barriers and impediments designed to keep people from vindicating their rights. And what we have in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, what we've discovered is a system where all sorts of barriers have been imposed to keep people from exercising their right to insist on a discount, and that's why we're going into federal court in the same way we went into Michigan and Wisconsin, and hoping that the federal courts will seize their obligation and do what the federal courts have done in Wisconsin and Michigan, and make sure that we have the ability to do the simple thing of verifying the vote.
And Jill, what have you been...
Questions from press? Press?
Would you be here today?
Yes.
Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania?
Absolutely. Throughout the election, I was often asked, because the Green Party has led recount campaigns before. Throughout the election, I was asked if there were questions about the vote and a recount was indicated, would I step up to the plate? And I always said, yes, I will do that, regardless of who the victor is, if there are questions about the process. These 3 states were identified because they have indicators that make them more, shall we say, red flags, due to the nature of the voting machines that are used, due to irregularities like this high number of blank ballots in Detroit, due to extremely thin margins. These are some of the indicators that people look for when they are when they're raising the question, was there compromise in this election, or was there machine error? Those are the questions that are asked. It's not a question of who won. So we went into these states because they met those criteria, because their deadlines had not yet closed, and because they have laws that actually permit a recount, unlike Florida, which would have made it very difficult.
Is that hard to believe that people wouldn't vote for either of the top 2 candidates considering some of the things they didn't like?
Well, put it this way. There are a variety of indicators that suggest that people actually did vote. They reported they voted when they came out of the polls. The exit polls are rather consistent with the polls prior to the election. So the United States USAID, our Secretary of State Department, looks at these kind of indicators when we are passing judgment on the fairness and accuracy of elections in other countries. So using the indicators that we ourselves use on other elections, there's some questions raised here that ought to be answered. Thank you.
Jill, can you describe how, at the very least, this continues the process of seeing to it going forward that we end voter suppression and every vote is counted here in America?
Thank you. Thank you so much, because there's not a quick and simple fix here. This is not just one issue, we fix it and everything is fine. We regard this question of election integrity, of counting the votes, making every vote count. This is a first step towards an election system that we can trust and which is just. So this is what we do right now because this is very time sensitive. We can only do this now to basically get rid of these voting machines that are wide open, that are an invitation to human error, to machine error, to malfeasance, and to hacking. It's time to make the touchscreen voting machines a thing of the past and to actually vote on a paper ballot where we have that enduring record, which you don't have from the touch screens, even if they spit out a piece of paper. It's a very fallible and fragile piece of paper. We need to be voting on paper ballots and counting them on these scanners where we are using automatic audits. We are constantly cross-checking to be sure that the vote is valid coming out of these machines. But that's not all. We must ensure that all people have the right to vote, that we have a constitutional right to vote, and that people are not purged from the voter rolls by things like this interstate cross-check, which is believed to have purged millions of people across the United States from the voter rolls through a very false standard that looks at common last names and just automatically eliminates people when names are similar across states. So this is a very unjust way that denies our constitutional right to vote. We also call for informing and empowering voters so that we can actually make good decisions as voters. We need open debates. We need a debate commission which is not controlled by the two corporate political parties who have been very busy ensuring that no other voices are heard. We need not only to have a right to vote, we need to know who we can vote for, and we need to be able to vote without fear. So we also call for a voting reform that enables you to go into the vote and rank your choices so you don't have to vote your fears rather than your values. This is ranked choice voting. It was just passed by the state of Maine, and it means you can vote for your first choice knowing that if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. So there is no splitting of the vote, there's no spoiling of the vote, there's no need to vote for a lesser evil. We can actually vote for the greater good, which is what we urgently need in this country.
One last question over there.
One more time. What's the next step for Florida right now, and what are you expecting from the recount?
Great. So the next step right now in the recount process, The next step right now is to ensure that in the same way Michigan and Wisconsin have launched their recount, recounting all the votes, doing a hand count of the paper ballots, we need to bring Pennsylvania up to that standard as well, which is difficult because Pennsylvania doesn't have any paper record for the most part. It's all in the machines. So it's 80% is in the machines. It's very important that we be able to examine the machines, to do a forensic analysis of the machines to make sure that this electronic voting has not been compromised. So that's number one, is to bring Pennsylvania up to speed and to complete the recount in the next week or so that we are done well in advance of this so-called Safe Harbor Day on December, what is it, the 15th? 13th. Well in advance of December 13th, and to move this forward in the way that the American people deserve.
What do you expect for the recount from Michigan?
Well, that recount will be beginning this afternoon at noontime, and we shall see. We don't yet have results from Wisconsin, but this is the whole reason to do it. To know whether this vote has been a good one or not, we actually have to examine the evidence. That's why we need to move forward with this hand count of the paper ballots. So stay tuned. It will be exciting. We'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.